What I'm going to do is I've got another idea where I can do the no fuel lean condition, which I think is better anyway, because I will probably get a leaner condition with no fuel in the exhaust. And I know there's a big discussion about, earlier I said it's because I'm not displacing oxygen, and now there's some concern that, we're actually reading fuel. We're not going to get into that today. It doesn't matter. The point is I'm going to trick the computer into thinking the injector is not unplugged when it is. And the way I'm going to do that is with a 12-volt light bulb. So what I'm thinking of doing here, and I'm hoping this will work, if I unplug the fuel injector and plug in this 12-volt light bulb, the PCM will see the circuit is complete. I will not get my open fuel injector circuit code causing the system to go into open loop. And this also allows me to run as long as I want without having to worry about damaging the coil possibly, or holding a ground to the coil or something like that. So this should give me a little freedom. So that is what I am going to try. Okay, I found my screwdriver, by the way. So we're in closed loop now. I've fully warmed up the car. Red is long-term fuel trim bank 1. Blue is long-term fuel trim bank 2. And we've got green short-term fuel trim bank 1, orange short-term fuel trim bank 2. Red and blue are going to be our important ones, of course. And what we would have seen earlier is we would have been at around 20 with the long terms. When I hit throttle, we would have seen it improve, again, somewhat representative of a vacuum leak. But what we're set at now is sort of more of a typical thing that we have and our most consistent reaction. We're low on the long-term fuel trims, but when I give throttle, it's going to really jump. Okay, so we can see the long and short term both jump up. The readout's a little bit slow, I know, on this tool, but it kind of sucks. But you can see that we're getting about 20 long-term fuel trim on both banks. This is in generic mode, by the way. Now, our concern is, from the last series, are these independent readings for each bank? And they should be in generic mode. So what I'm going to do is induce a lean condition only on bank 2 right now by bypassing a fuel injector with that light bulb. And before I do that, let's make sure we've got oxygen sensor traces here. And we do. One thing about this tool also that I don't like, while I'm in one screen, it no longer collects data from the previous screen. So if I go back here, it kind of starts over again. If I jump back to my O2 sensors, it leaves from where we left off. So it can get a little confusing, but keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and induce a lean condition on bank 2 right now, see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try to quickly install my light bulb here. There we go. Okay, and we can see the light bulb is flashing. Hopefully you can see that right there. And then we are getting some reaction here, so let's see what happens. Bank 2 long-term fuel trim is indeed going lean. It is going, let's see, bank 1 has not moved. Are we getting response from 1? Yes, we are. Okay, so that's good. I was a little worried about that again because we've had some non-responsiveness issues. So it does look like we have, now where's our short-term bank 2? That's going to be orange. Short-term bank 2 has already normalized. That was awful quick. So basically, we've normalized our short-term fuel trim already by holding it a long term of about 21. But look, that is clearly independent reaction for a bank-specific variable. By these numbers here, we should see O2 sensor activity, because since bank 2 has independently adjusted and we have no adjustment on the short-term fuel trim, that means it must have brought back O2 sensor activity on bank 2. And we see it did. O2 sensor has recovered. So, albeit a little rough, I guess. But anyway, so that is very good indication that bank 2 is acting independently, and that was the bank that we had a question about. Okay, I just wanted to verify that we also see independent oxygen sensor results. I just plugged in the sensor, I'm sorry, the connector for the fuel injector. Obviously, this would cause us to go very rich on the oxygen sensor with the addition of fuel after it adjusted for not having it. So let's get normalized here. So this is a very good sign, by the way. We've got two completely different oxygen sensor results right there. So I'm leaning very much towards that these individual banks are responding correctly. Now we still have to repeat this with inducing bank 1 variable. Now let's go ahead and let me just do one more thing here. I want to add propane in there and verify that now both banks react to the propane. Okay, so just adding propane to the intake, we should see our short terms drop, and they are dropping. And we should see both long terms start to drop now. And they do simultaneously. This is a very good sign. All right, good. Oh, let's make sure that that had an effect on the O2 sensors. Now, obviously, we missed it on the O2 sensors and they're going lean. But let's go ahead and add the propane back. We should see the O2 sensors both go rich. And there we go. So good. Let's go ahead and repeat this real quick on bank 1 now. Okay, so we can see we're back about normalized again. Let's verify that we have our lean response. And interesting, it seems like we don't now. See, we actually improved just slightly in our fuel trim now. This is one of those inconsistencies I was talking about earlier. But anyway, that's probably because I maybe turned the engine off and then on again so I could make sure I connect this sensor without causing an error. Well, anyway, but this just goes to show you some of the variability I'm dealing with. We're no longer getting that really strong increase in fuel trim with a throttle. Well, what's going on here? Well, you see, we got a little correction there. Let's see what's happened there. Okay, so after letting this cook for a little bit longer, we have returned to our higher fuel trim, but we are getting an increase now again with throttle demand there. So let's go ahead and put this light bulb into bank 1 and verify that bank 1 goes lean and bank 2 remains independent. All right, bypassed fuel injector bank 1. So let's see if we start getting a reaction on bank 1. Long-term fuel trim bank 1 is going to be red. We can see that we are getting a reaction on bank 1 only. Well, you can really hear the misfire. So there we go. Bank 1 has dramatically increased. Kind of interesting how the short-term fuel trim bank 1, which is green, didn't shoot up nearly as high as I would have expected, by the way. But whatever the case, we can see that now we've reversed things, that bank 1 now has its own fuel trim. Let's verify O2s are working. We have O2 sensor trace. So let's go ahead and talk about what this tells us. Let's see how our long-term fuel trim bank 2 is. It's a little bit higher now, but it's certainly independent. And after running a little bit longer, we did have bank 2 come back down to 0 again. Let's make sure it's acting independently there. Yeah, it definitely is. Being a scientist, I am naturally curious, and it occurred to me, I wonder what that same thing is going to look like in enhanced mode, both on auto tap and on auto ingenuity. So sorry, this one's just for me, but also I know a lot of you other guys are thinking, damn, that's a pretty good idea, because remember, that is what got us into this trouble in the first place. So I want to see if we induce that, now that we've confirmed that we can get independent bank reactions using that little light bulb trick, I wonder if we will see a bank 2 reaction in auto tap now. Just out of curiosity. And the other thing is, it would be nice to know that we do see that differentiated bank variability in the enhanced parameter mode for auto ingenuity, because it would then allow me to trust a little more the enhanced parameters, because we may need some of those enhanced parameters for some of the diagnoses we're going to do now that we have a direction. Good old auto tap, my favorite scan tool up until this case study. But you can see we've got our O2 sensor traced down here. Red is bank 1, green bank 2. Always red bank 1, green bank 2 to make things easier because there's a lot of information. Short-term fuel trims we can see holding at 0. Looks like we got a very nice stable bank 2 long-term fuel trim right there that holds stable even under throttle. And by the way, you can see again the variability. Hitting the throttle decreased the fuel trim instead of increased it as we saw before. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to go with the most consistent issue, and that is going to be that this would normally increase. Now notice no response from bank 2 fuel trim. Okay, so after letting this cook for a while, now when I hit the throttle, you see we now increase in our fuel trim. And I will tell you, when driving the car, it's actually fairly substantial. It'll go over 20. But notice again, no reaction at all from bank 2. And I could go through the thing of adding propane again, but I know I don't need to do that. What would happen if I add propane? We will go rich on both O2 sensors. We will go negative on both short-term fuel trims. Only bank 1 fuel trim will drop. Bank 2 in green long-term fuel trim will just stay stationary. What I want to do is induce a lean condition on bank 2 with our little light bulb trick and see what happens. Okay, so let's see here. What we've got is we see our short-term fuel trim is greatly increasing, showing the lean condition response to the oxygen sensor. Looks like we are slowly going lean on bank 2 long term here. But it's not going to be anything like when I do this on the other side. It does look like we are getting a little reaction there. It is interesting, but this is a vastly different reaction than what we saw in generic mode with Auto Ingenuity. It does look like we are getting some reaction there. Now, is that an issue with the scan tool, or is that actually a real report? Well, we know from looking generic mode off of Auto Ingenuity that this is not a real reaction. I still don't know where that's coming from, but we're not going to worry about it because it's only going to deter us from our goal of actually fixing the car. I'm not so worried about fixing scan tool communication right now. But let's go ahead and try this on the other bank. Okay, so starting the car now, and you can definitely hear the misfire, and you can see here going very lean on the O2 sensor. We're increasing already short-term fuel trim, and immediate increase in long-term fuel trim on that bank. So I still don't know what's going on here with that bank 2, but to be honest with you, I really don't care. My objective is to fix the issue with the lean condition with the car. I will worry about scan tool communication later. But one thing I want to do is we want to repeat this on the Auto Ingenuity enhanced parameters to make sure that we have communication there. All right, back to Auto Ingenuity, which I am starting to gain more respect for. I just wish it had that awesome interface that Auto Tap does, where I can create my own custom graphs and locate them wherever I want. But we are going to go into enhanced powertrain. No, not generic. See, I'm getting in a habit. Enhanced powertrain mode. And let's see, because I can tell you that I definitely have had that same issue with bank 2 not responding in enhanced mode with this program as well, but other times I have not. All right, and just because I'm goofing around here and I want to speed this up, we're just going to look at the long-term fuel trims. We already can assume if we get changes here, we would see it from the short-term fuel trims. So let's see. We never know what we're going to get here, do we? But we do get the increase in throttle. And I actually believe I have this figured out, believe it or not. Actually, I didn't figure that out. One of you guys did, but we'll get there. So what I want to do is go ahead and induce that misfire on bank 1 real quick. Okay, so we've induced misfire Let's see that that's working. There's my light right there. So it's working. And there we go. We've got our reaction now. Okay, and sorry I wasn't very quick with the camera there, but what we've got is bank 1 with the misfire going rich independently. So this is good news. It gives a little more credibility to my enhanced parameters for auto ingenuity. We can clearly see auto tap is having some kind of issue. Now, that is not to say I have had where I do not have a response from bank 2 on auto ingenuity in enhanced mode, but so far I've yet to have any issues in generic mode, which is what we would expect. So anyway, I just wanted to check all that. All right, so what does that tell us? Well, it tells me I don't give a damn about that freeze frame, because we have confirmed for the first time now, which is a huge step, and my apologies to you guys that followed that like 8-part series where I was figuring all this out, but as you see, I am capable of learning. The evidence is overwhelming. Each bank is acting independently of the other bank. There's no borrowed values or anything like that. So if we are seeing a lean condition on both banks, there is a lean condition on both banks. This changes our strategy dramatically now from looking for possibilities for a single bank lean condition to now looking at what would cause a lean condition on both banks. Now, that said, we can rule out a vacuum leak, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with the fact that there's variability on the time that we drive. I actually do have an idea though. But what this does is we're going to do a complete reversal from the first series. In the first series, of course, we were trying to think what are things that could cause a lean condition only on bank 1, only under load. That is no longer true. Now we're thinking what are things that can cause a lean condition on both banks only under load. So let's look at what we can rule out based on what we already did in the previous series. All right, so you can see with the variability how in the previous series we were branching all directions with crazy stuff like is one bank in open loop and the other bank in closed loop and stuff like that. But I think we're past that now because of our direction. Now that we've got a direction and the fact that we did sort of like an 8-part series already with every test in the book, we can eliminate possibilities. If we are going to look at a lean condition under load, and granted we also have a lean condition that's not, it improves when load is applied, but I have an explanation for that too because I think I know what's wrong. But mainly our most consistent thing is lean condition under load, and these are all possibilities that you guys have brought up. And maybe a couple that I added as well that could explain this. And we can actually eliminate some of these now. So let me get my towel. And this is my favorite part of any video, eliminating variables. But obviously, one of the first that would come to mind, a fuel pressure problem. Well, in a previous video in that series on testing your 0171, 0174 diagnostic skills, we extensively did fuel pressure tests. There is no fuel pressure issue with this vehicle. Another possibility is a dirty mass airflow sensor. I cleaned the mass airflow sensor. There was no difference. It was very clean to begin with. Another problem is an inaccurate math. We did not rule that out. Another one is an inaccurate IAT. We ruled that out in this series. Vacuum leak is not an option. I have it up there because it looks like we have a vacuum leak at first, which is very definitive. There's no question there's a difference in reaction when we first get out of open loop for the first 10 or 15 minutes versus later. My theory on what's wrong with this car is going to explain that perfectly, but we know there is not a vacuum leak in this car because of the smoke tests. The other problem somebody had brought up 2 bad O2 sensors. We know we don't even have 1 bad O2 sensor. Sorry. In that last series, it looked really exciting for the guys that wanted to replace some O2 sensors. No longer is that the case. The O2 sensors work. We are done with that, period. Bad PCM, we have not ruled out. Throttle position sensor, we did rule out actually in the last series at the very end. Another one, rear O2 sensor. Somebody brought this up, and I just want to talk about this real quick 1 second. I gave some incorrect information in one of the earliest videos that I did, which I think was one of my best ones actually, on how to diagnose a bad catalytic converter. And in that video, I had mentioned that the rear O2 sensors are specifically and exclusively for the purpose of monitoring oxygen content in the exhaust post-cat. I may have been a bit hasty in that statement there. Back earlier, maybe 15 years ago or so, that would have been true. But in later model cars, some research that I have done, especially at the recommendation of some of you guys who are professional mechanics who watch this channel, which I appreciate so much. Thank you, and please keep doing that because I need the help. I have come to find out that rear O2 sensors do have some minor adjustment with fuel trim and some input with fuel trim. We'll have to look at that at some day. But given that fact, and the fact that, as you can see, I clearly ignored rear O2s, that is a possibility. However, I do not believe it is a possibility on this car. On this model year, I do believe that the rear O2 sensors do not contribute to fuel trim, but we'll have to check that. Another thing was air injection reaction. Definitely could be a source of unmetered air coming into the exhaust. We ruled this out in the last series, as well as exhaust leak. We did that a number of ways, both with smoke testing those systems, and I clamped off the air injection system and showed there was no variation whatsoever. So the other possibility, an EGR valve being open, I can rule that out. Again, we would have seen smoke coming through the intake on the exhaust test with the smoke machine, and also the fact that there are no rough idle problems when the car is idling. An open EGR, you would have a very noticeable issue. Again, as stated, no drivability issues, no misfires, nothing like that. You would never know there's a problem. Another one was sort of something I accidentally noticed, a possible bad O2 bias signal. O2 bias signal, there should be a 0.45 volt signal from the PCM to the O2 sensor. I measured 0.37 volts on that bias in the previous series, and that was a possible issue. Somebody else, I can't think of their name offhand, and I appreciate you for doing this, had brought up that that difference was because of an effect with my meter, and I would have actually seen probably the O2 bias drop on the scan tool with the O2 sensor unplugged while doing my measurements with the voltmeter, and seen that they were consistent after all. But this was a result of my not knowing that unplugging O2 sensors in my attempt to determine individual bank reactions would also cause an open loop condition. And of course, unplugging the O2 sensors, I got results I totally didn't expect, and it threw us off track. So sorry about that, guys. Other issue people have brought up, a bad map sensor. We have not ruled that out. Misfire, we have ruled out because there are no misfires on the misfire counter, which is accurate. I validated that, and no drivability issues. I would know if I have a misfire, trust me. Injectors, injector imbalance, we originally did when we thought there was a bank-specific fuel deficit. Either way, we tested all injectors, and the injectors are fine. There was a minor half of a PSI difference in injector number 5. We now know, given the fact that we are no longer pursuing a bank-specific issue, that we can dismiss that as insignificant, which it was anyway. Another thing, the PCM needs to be flashed. This goes again with the PCM problem. I do not believe that will be the case, but it is not ruled out yet. And an evap system leak. While I do not believe this is going to be likely, because I know I'm familiar with evap systems pretty well for being a home mechanic, and it is virtually impossible that I can see that you're going to have a leak that will get into the intake and not have some type of detection from the evap error codes. Even a pinhole will generally show a leak. They can be very tricky to find. The person that recommends this is offering some suggestions on how it is possible we could have an evap leak and not have the code throw and still have it coming, bringing fresh air into our system. We will put that sort of at the bottom of the list, but we have not ruled that out. But there is one thing that only one person brought up, and it was as a result of an observation during the last series, the last video in that series. And in that, what happened was I noticed when I turned the air conditioning on, the fuel trim rocketed. And when you turn the air conditioning off, the fuel trim drops dramatically. And B. Chris L. noticed what I believe is going to be what is wrong with the high fuel trim on this engine as a result of that thing that I just threw in there as kind of an observation. And it is going to be both explaining the air conditioning issue and the high fuel trim issue with the car, and the fact that the car changes in its fuel trim problem from what looks like a vacuum leak. So in other words, a high fuel trim at idle that improves with load and then later reverses a good fuel trim that gets worse under load. And it is going to be